ready for this. You're gonna love this.
If Donald Trump's presidency ends before November 2020, it'll come as no surprise. The tactics being employed to remove him from office have been successfully used all around the world to oust political leaders time and time again. The methods are proven effective and time-tested.
This is beyond anybody's expectations. There's been no crowd like this. And I can tell you, some of the candidates they went in, they didn't know the air conditioner didn't work. They sweated like dogs.
They began to maybe go home during the president's speech.
The outrageous rhetoric from one group or another might seem crazy, ill-informed, or ignorant, but the people behind it are not crazy or ignorant. They know exactly what they're saying. They're fully aware of the anger and frustration felt by rational people when they hear themselves being characterized as racist or xenophobic. And as anger and frustration increase, so do the cultural divisions.
Pepper spray as well. You can see another canister there. They are also using flashbang grenades. Here comes another gas canister.
It's actually been an open secret for decades, but for the first time now, the CIA has released documents that show its role in the 1953 coup. That is the coup that toppled Iran's democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, had moved to nationalize oil production in Iran. Well, the U.S. was concerned at the time that that would mean a victory for the Soviets in the Cold War. So shortly after his election, the CIA began to plan his overthrow, teaming up with Britain's MI6.
Now, the CIA, we've seen it spelling out its involvement in a series of newly declassified documents. They're still feeling the after effects of that coup, which was carried out at the height of the Cold War, to this very day, right?
Absolutely, and it did lead to the abortion of the evolutionary political process led to a revolutionary process 25 years later. This is a moment that these documents kind of illustrate the consequences of opting for stability over democratic values.
You may remember Abdul Karim Qasim, who was president of Iraq in the early 60s. Qasim came up with a unique concept. He said Iraqi oil ought to go to benefit the Iraqi people. And so we decided that Qasim had to go. The CIA sent an assassination team. It was headed by a man who was still going through high school, an Iraqi citizen who was still going through high school. They riddled Qasim's car with bullets on the streets of Baghdad, and the head of this assassination team was wounded and fled to Syria. His name was Saddam Hussein. He was a CIA agent in those days, an assassin for us.
In September 1970, Salvador Allende became the first Marxist leader to come to power through free elections. Allende won by a narrow margin, not uncommon in Chile. But even before his inauguration, Allende's right to rule was being challenged by powerful opponents. Richard Nixon was engaged in a Cold War with the Soviet Union. Henry Kissinger, his Secretary of State, once said, "I don't see why we need to stand by and watch a country go communist due to the irresponsibility of its own people."
Economic warfare and propaganda work in concert to divide the people along racial, religious, or economic lines. Propaganda, meant to resonate with people on the fringes of the ideological spectrum, inflames the opinions of those on the opposite side, while the same tactic is used in reverse on the other side simultaneously until everyone, it seems, is a radical extremist.
Nixon struck back, quietly moving to cut off loans to Chile. As credits dried up, Chilean industry began to suffer. Prices rose and frustration grew. Chileans had to wait online for food and staples that were running short. After 2 years, Allende's socialist experiment seemed to be failing. Anti-Allende protesters had taken to the streets. Allende took the podium. "The only way they will get me out of office before my term is up," he said, "is to riddle my body with bullets." On September 11th, the Chilean military moved to overthrow the Allende government. With tanks moving toward the National Palace, Allende refused to resign, making good on his promise to defend Chile's democracy with his own life. A short time later, the Moneda was in flames and Allende was dead. After 128 years of democracy, Chile had become a military dictatorship. Even before the coup, there had been allegations that the CIA and ITT had conspired against Allende. Both maintained they had had no direct hand in the coup.
ITT did not encourage or participate in any way in any alleged plot for a military coup in Chile.
But through a series of congressional investigations, it emerged that there had been an American plan to keep Allende out of office.
You told him that you were prepared to put up the $1 million in support of a government plan for the purpose of bringing about a coalition of the opposition to Allende.
That's correct, Mr. Senator.
I thought that the United States had the policy of trying, and the testimonies here said it was to continue democracy in Chile.
Yeah. Mr. Dean, democracy, as I understand the term, is the right of the people to determine their government by vote.
Well,
isn't it?
Congressmen became incensed as they learned that while Allende was in office, the CIA had spent millions agitating strikes and on propaganda to throw the economy into chaos.
Do you see any distinction between Mr. Allende and Mr. Castro? You've mentioned the two. Do you see no distinction between the two?
The distinction between Castro and
Allende?
I would say merely a distinction with a difference. That's probably all at this stage.
You disregard the fact that Allende was elected by popular vote in a regular election, and Mr. Castro took over by force of arms. Isn't that a very big distinction if you're interested in democracy?
Secretary of State Henry Kissinger denied the American government had played a direct role in the coup, but he defended CIA activities aimed at undermining the Allende government.
All of the matters to which you refer have been developed by well-established procedures in the government that have been consistently tightened, approved by the President, and briefed to the appropriate committees. This doesn't make them right. I'm just trying to explain.
Makes it all the more appalling to me, Mr. Secretary. You said still at another point where the age-old antagonism between freedom and tyranny is concerned, we are not neutral. Well, I agree full-heartedly with these principles as you've enunciated them, but I am puzzled. We are now told, despite these words about the principles that distinguish us as a nation, that we not only interfered for the purpose of bringing down that government in an elaborate covert action policy by the CIA, but that we were justified in doing it, if I understood the President correctly, because the Russians do it.
The United States had sought to hold the line against communism in Chile. With American help, Marxism had been defeated there, but so had democracy.
After an assassination attempt on President Jimmy Carter by men with the unlikely names of Raymond Lee Harvey and Osvaldo Espinosa Ortiz during the run-up to the 1979 elections, Carter canceled the scheduled televised address to the American people in which he planned to announce major changes in government. Carter told his closest aides that he, quote, had lost control of the government, unquote. Later, the men arrested for the attempt on his life were released and never heard from again. To be clear, there is no evidence that the CIA was behind the plot and intentionally used men with names that, when spoken together, sound like Lee Harvey Oswald, to send a clear message to Carter that they can shoot a president in the forehead in the city square in front of thousands of witnesses, show the shooting on TV, claim he was shot from behind, and there isn't a damn thing anyone can do about it. What is clear is that Carter didn't do much after that, and despite the interesting details of the case, it went almost unreported by news outlets.
I want to talk to you right now about a fundamental threat to American democracy.
The tyrant has fallen, and Iraq is free.
Been another spasm of violence in Iraq.
Chaos returned with a vengeance.
14 young men abducted, tortured, then shot dead. It's possible that Iraq could move towards civil war.
The insurgents have stepped up their attacks since an interim Iraqi government was...
Propaganda is effective, more so than many people realize. The idea that propaganda doesn't work on me because I'm too smart to fall for it is itself propaganda at work.
There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
Whatever your feelings about Donald Trump and the campaign to delegitimize his presidency, the fact remains that he is the target of a program that has been used successfully so many times and in so many countries, including the U.S., that to list them all wouldn't be possible in a 10-minute video. For me, the question is not if Trump's time in office will end early, it's how will it end.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
We came, we saw, he died.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.